When people ask me what the best tank is tier for tier in the game, this tank is one that always comes up, and it is the feature of a free reward within the new season. So if you're interested in how you can pick up this new reward, essentially what you have to do is get to season rank 50. You can then get the free skin, which is for this tank, and it is the tier 9 Czechoslovakian medium tank. This thing is quite possibly tier for tier better than the tier 10. It's the best tier for tier tank in the tech tree line for the Czech mediums, I think, and for the most part it could potentially even be the best Czech tank. And if you even compare it to some of the other mediums and all of the various different tanks that are already in the game at tier 9, this is definitely a very, very competitive one, especially if you compare it with a lot of the kind of high tier, high skill cap tanks within World of Tanks, because ultimately some tanks are limited by the actual skill cap of them. You know, yes, most people will be able to have good games in them, but maybe they're too slow to be able to get anywhere to impact the game in the games that you feel like you could have been a hell of a lot more of an impact. But this game in particular showcases just how good the Skoda T50 can be, and why you actually want to use the skin by playing the tank, because most people probably get the skin, never actually get the tank. And I think that if any of you are wanting to get better at the game, the Skoda T50 is one that will teach you on leaps and bounds. This thing really knows or has the ability to do so much more than a lot of the tanks in the game, and that means that not only do you have the ability to learn how to spot, because this tank has fantastic view range, not only do you get the fact that you have an autoloader which teaches you all sorts about actually being able to use autoloaders correctly, but it also teaches you a lot about the mobility and movement. And people always say like, oh, this tank's not overpowered because at tier 10, when you come into tier 10 games, like tier 10s are better than you. It's like, yeah, just because tier 10s are better than you doesn't mean the tank itself is not fantastic for the tier that you're playing at. I always see those comments, and you saw that with the recent Czech heavy that's come into the game, the Skoda T56. A lot of people saying, well, it's not even that good. Like, when you come up against tier 10 games all the time, you know, it's not particularly that good. But compare it to other tier 8s, which, by the way, all come up against the same tanks, are going to be much worse, which means that the Skoda T56 is going to be amazing comparatively to the other tier 8s. And most people like make these statements where, oh my god, the tank is terrible because it plays tier 10. But yeah, that's because it's a tier 8. Compare it to other tier 8s, not tier 10s. Like, yeah, I think that you're seeing that a similar sort of thing come with the Skoda T50, and I'm sure that many of you will see that, many of you will comment that, because ultimately the tank is only as good as the player driving it. You have to actually know what you're doing in them, but I feel like this tank in general, for the majority of players, especially if you're trying to learn how to be good at the game, or learn how to kind of increase the amount of damage you're doing, increase the spotting, learn the maps, and all of that sort of stuff, this tank is perfect because you have the mobility, and mobility is something that I feel like everyone knows that the mobility is really, really useful in World of Tanks, but most people don't know for the exact reason, because not only does it give you the choice of being able to mobilise yourself around the map, change the course of the battle dependent on maybe you went the wrong flank, or maybe you just in another tank wouldn't have been able to get out of the way of certain situations where the mobility offers that. But it also does something else, and that's because it opens you up to a lot more areas on the map, which allows you to be able to learn the maps quicker. You're learning positions that maybe you can use halfway through the game, that if you're just playing solo heavy tanks or playing really slow tank destroyers, or all of these various different types of tanks that maybe don't have the mobility, then you're never being in those situations halfway through the game where you have to move across the map because you just can't, which means you can't use the positions that you could have, and therefore you're not getting as much experience playing in all of these various different positions. And one of the first things I did when I was learning the game was to actually swap to a medium tank, was to play tanks that maybe I would initially do slightly worse in, but overall you don't lose the skill of playing a heavy tank just because you played a few games in a medium. It just means that you now have a bigger skill set. You can apply medium tank logic to some of the faster heavies, and vice versa. You can apply heavy tank logic to some of the mediums as well that maybe have armor, some of the Russian mediums for example. But I think that this is a good distinction between the Skoda T50, because this tank doesn't have armor, so you have to play it in a completely different way, and I feel like a lot of people never really move out of their comfort zone on World of Tanks, hence why they kind of get stagnant, hence why they don't really progress or get better comparatively to some other people who are maybe just diversifying what they're playing all of these weird different tanks and novel tanks, and then moving forward with that. But yeah, I feel like that's really, really important. But what you can see me doing here, it's 55 seconds until the enemy team cap. Don't know if someone else is going to jump in there, because, you know, typical camp. But we're going to go in. We've only got one shell. I'd never recommend going in with just one shell, but we know the bloke's on very low hit points, so we can just go in, reset the cap, and then move away if needs be. So yeah, we reset the cap. Means that the enemy team are going to find it very hard now to actually cap out or win the game, because they'd have to do something very special. And of course, in true Eclipse fashion, doing something that was somewhat intelligent and then doing something completely unintelligent by ending up on my side. But there we go. Still, we've done 5,720 damage in a tier 9 that has also got 965 assistance, and for the most part it's been very easy. And I think most people actually think like, oh, this is just a game that you'd never be able to have, but it really comes easy in the Skoda T50 is what I'm trying to say. Like, you can do things that maybe other people just can't. Maybe they just don't have the stats and everything regarding the actual tank itself to be able to do everything that you want. You can see me doing here is reloading, because why not? And now we'll just progress towards the one remaining tank on the enemy team, being the GUI 100, and hopefully we can finish him off. Obviously, one thing that this tank is terrible is coming up against artillery rounds. So if you do take an artillery round in this thing, you don't take it, you just basically bend over and you take it. Yeah, you know what I mean. This thing just does not take artillery rounds at all, and it means that you get taken out very quickly. So it's kind of the one balancing feature. But you can see this replay, 6,594 damage done, 2,112 base experience in a tier 10 game. Pretty much could play at tier 10, to be honest with you. This tank wouldn't be an overpowered tier 10, but considering it's a tier 9 that can compete with tier 10s as kind of an average tier 10 level, then yeah, I think that this thing is definitely worth investing your time to try and get. Now we'll jump into one more replay before the video ends, showcase a little bit more about what the tank's capabilities are other than just this. Next map, Canals. A map that, to be honest with you, is pretty suited to medium tanks, so there's no real surprise that we're going to end up with a decent result. And of course, you guys have had so many great results, and you've sent me them through on Discord. You've done all of these various different things. Obviously, you let me know in the comment section, and I do try and read every single comment. There's a lot of them in the majority of cases every single day. I'm probably looking at like 300 a day. Yeah, trying to find time to read every single one is difficult, but I do try and catch up on the weekends. And so if you get a random reply from me after like 3 days of leaving a comment, then that's why. But yeah, I always try and make sure that I do that. And of course, I try and read them on the day of release. And although I might not respond to all of them, trust me, at some point I'll probably have read your comment. But one thing that I have seen in the comments is the maps, and a lot of people want to see map guides and map videos, but I feel like it's very difficult to come up with a good solution to telling you how to play a map, because essentially, like, there's so many variables with playing certain maps. Like, I could tell you the basic positions, but most of you probably already know the basic positions on the majority of maps, so going through them is going to just be like spoon feeding you stuff that you already know, so there's not much point in that. And for the most part, the gameplays and stuff that I showcase on the channel, like this one, pretty much show you the key things and decision making processes that you need to do in your own gameplay if you are wanting to get slightly better. Obviously, if you're better than me, don't watch my videos to get better, because you just probably not. But one thing that I feel like most people who watch the videos who are trying to learn to get better probably just need to know when to move, when to go, because ultimately at a certain point you'll have learnt to be able to aim. So the next thing that you can kind of advance yourself over other players who know how to aim as well is pretty simple with the controls. It doesn't take a long time to master that. You know, when you first start, it is a little bit overwhelming. But as you go through, the core fundamental mechanics of the game don't really change ever. So you're going to see you get pretty good at that, and therefore like there's not much you can improve on. But the key thing that you can improve on in World of Tanks, and what a lot of people kind of miss out on, is actually your decision making, because ultimately a lot of people will, for example, sit out in the middle of an open field and they'll get a ton of hits and think, oh, I hit every single shot that I could, but I only lasted like 1 minute, which means that, yeah, you had a bad game. But ultimately it's not because you may not know the weak points of a lot of the tanks on the enemy team, or you may not know all of the various different factors in the game that you know how to spot and stuff like that. It's just purely because you made the mistake of going in the wrong direction or putting yourself in the wrong position, which ultimately led to you getting taken out. And so many people I see all of the time that do that. But what you just saw in this replay is I could have sat on top of that hill for the rest of the game, hoped my team won, and ended up with maybe just another clip worth of damage. But instead, I signify, or I know that our team are doing quite well, so there's no point in me just sitting there. There's very little point. I might end up getting taken out very quickly, unintentionally, from the tanks if I make this kind of more aggressive play towards the end, but it's very unlikely given that I've got a lot of support around me. So why not push up? Why not try and get different angles on tanks that are remaining in the game? And ultimately that's how you can win games anyway, because even if you're in like a scenario where maybe you're coming in where you think your team are going to lose, you can make the movements, you can be the one that switches your game plan, where you go, actually I'm not just going to sit here in this hill area, I'm going to be the one that now moves, takes a new angle and decides that I'm going to be the one that's just going to pump out that damage into the side of a tank, then I'm going to leave. Like, obviously depends very much on the tank that you're playing. I'm not foolish enough to think if you're in a Mouse you can flank people, but you know what I mean by like use your strengths to their advantages. And even if you are playing a Mouse, you can still be really aggressive to the point where you can push forward and you can use your armor to be able to block a few rounds as you're advancing and stuff like that, and you can potentially try and spot for your team. And that's ultimately how you differentiate yourself comparatively to other people on World of Tanks. And that's really what I feel like separates the someone with like a 70% win rate, for example, and someone with a 52% win rate. They've mastered pretty much the core mechanics of the game, both of them, but the player that's got 70% knows so much about the movement, the different ways in which you can rotate around the map and do all of the extra decision making that changes them from being 52% to a 70%. And I think that that's the core, and that's what these next few gameplay episodes are going to focus on, is just trying to get your brain working into the various different ways in which you can maybe be better, survive longer, produce better results consistently. Because me myself, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I'm pretty much top in every single game that I play. Yes, I've played a lot of World of Tanks console, so that's probably because of that. But what I do have is to try and speed up your process to get to that point where you can consistently come top in almost every single game, bar obviously there's games where you don't. But anyway, regardless of that, I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, if you are interested in learning to get better, I will leave on the right hand side a how to get better at World of Tanks playlist that covers loads of different aspects, the core game mechanics, various different spotting, equipment, all of that is in the playlist. So if you want to check out how to get better, then that's on the right. And of course, if you're interested in checking out the other Czechoslovakian premium tank that's just come out, the Skoda T56, that will be on the left. It's an amazing tank, trust me, it's worth a watch. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.